Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a truly brilliant piece of satirical fiction called The Devil's Second Visit. It was penned by Max and Claude as a spiritual successor to Mikhail Bulgakov's legendary work. We're going to completely break down the core sociological arguments hidden right beneath the surface of this story, specifically looking at how oppressive systems evolve over time, moving from brute force to, well, silent paperwork. It's a wildly fascinating look at society, censorship, and the unstoppable nature of true art.
So think about this for a second, because this is the question that drives the entire narrative. What actually happens when the devil visits a city that has already perfected its own evil? The story drops Professor Woland, who is the devil himself, right back into Moscow in 1960. It's been 25 years since his first visit, and he's not really here to create chaos this time. He's here to perform the ultimate audit of human society, and what he finds is just astonishing.
Section 1. The Devil Returns. A stranger on Gorky Street.
Okay, let's dive into this. It's a completely mundane Tuesday afternoon in 1960, and Professor Woland has returned, essentially pulled back by the sheer gravitational pull of Moscow's absurdity. But right away, he observes that the city has fundamentally changed. When he first visited back in 1935, the evil of the state was loud, it was crude, and it was super obvious. But now, the state has refined its methods. Woland notes that the machinery of control is so sophisticated that it has become completely invisible. It's masquerading as tedious, procedural bureaucracy. People aren't terrified of monsters knocking down their doors at night anymore. They're terrified of forms, committees, and pending reviews. And Woland, being a professional connoisseur of darkness, actually tips his hat to this. He considers it genuine progress.
Section 2. The Evolution of Fear. 1935 versus 1960.
During his walk through the city, Woland pieces together the central sociological thesis. Just look at the stark contrast between these two eras. In 1935, under Stalin, society was entirely defined by overt terror. People were treated as moving targets, facing empty store shelves and a crude, obvious state machinery. It was named fear. You knew exactly what you were afraid of. But jump to 1960, and we're looking at unnamed, procedural anxiety. The state doesn't need to use overt violence anymore because the population has internalized the control. The machinery is invisible. Instead of totally empty shelves, you have elaborate distribution anomalies handled by endless committees.
This brings us to a brilliantly dark concept the authors describe as the metabolism of fear. Basically, the fear didn't leave Moscow. It just metabolized into this constant, low-level culture of alertness. Citizens are now self-regulating through their ordinary daily routines. They've been meticulously trained to wait for bureaucratic approval for literally everything. It turns the entire population into a self-maintaining, perpetual motion machine of social control, which, from the state's perspective, is vastly more efficient.
So how does this actually shape the culture of the city day to day? Well, Woland's right-hand man, Koroviev, the guy in the obnoxious checkered suit, points out that citizens naturally perform this really complicated psychological operation to survive. They basically live two simultaneous lives. You have the official life, which handles the paperwork, the fake public smiles, the carefully safe conversations, and then you have the actual life, which exists entirely in kitchens, in hushed whispers, and in underground jokes that become wildly inventive. This split identity isn't just a temporary survival tactic, it's evolved into a permanent cultural condition. They are living in the gaps of state control.
Section 3. Truth at the Theater. Shattering the Illusion.
To really test the waters of this new Moscow, Woland's crew manipulates a local artistic director. They manage to completely bypass the mandatory 14-week state review process and book a supernatural performance at the Variety Theater for that very Friday. Now picture the scene. It's a sold-out crowd at the Central House of Culture. The audience is absolutely buzzing with this rare electric energy because they all secretly know this event bypassed official channels. Which brings us to a massive question. What actually happens when absolute truth is spoken in a city built on lies? Woland walks onto the stage, sits in a simple chair under a single lamp, and instead of performing some magic trick, he just starts talking to the audience with total, unfiltered honesty.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core message of a speech. Woland tells the dead silent crowd, what it has understood is that named fear creates martyrs, but unnamed fear creates people who are not sure exactly what they are afraid of. That is such a heavy, profound realization. The state has successfully turned the fear inward, effectively making the people consume themselves with constant doubt.
Right after this incredible monologue, the retinue performs. But their magic isn't cheap parlor illusions. The real magic is the shocking release of collective honesty.
Korolev takes soul-crushing official state documents and turns them into vanishing scarves. Behemoth, the giant talking black cat, conducts a brutally honest interview with himself about art and the state. Azazello just stands there silently, intensely seeing the audience for 30 very uncomfortable seconds, totally stripping away their bureaucratic labels. And to top it off, Woland holds up a huge stack of brilliant, suppressed manuscripts that the state had buried. The result? The entire audience erupts into a massive, unified, 3-minute standing ovation. Literally, even Volkov, the secret state observer sitting in the back row, finds himself clapping along.
Section 4. The bureaucratic machine. Processing the impossible.
The morning after the performance gives us comedic absurdity at its absolute finest. I mean, how exactly does an invisible, procedural bureaucracy handle a completely inexplicable supernatural anomaly? Well, the state doesn't call an exorcist, they call an early morning meeting, naturally. Stroyev, Chisnikov, and Volkov convene this unofficial, unrecorded committee. They investigate Woland's paperwork, fully expecting to catch him, only to find that his housing records and passports are flawless. In fact, they date back before the filing systems even existed. Defeated by this impossibly perfect bureaucracy, the state's official response procedure to the literal devil is simply to observe him indefinitely without taking any action. They are completely paralyzed by their own rules.
Meanwhile, Woland's henchmen are out having a hilarious spree of bureaucratic pranks. Korolev is basically visiting various institutions to actively dismantle their unstated rules of suppression. At 10 a.m., he casually terrifies a literary journal editor into actually publishing a beautiful, suppressed poem that was hidden in a desk drawer. At noon, he guides a confused clerk to a misfiled memo, suddenly bypassing a totally dead-end protocol at the State Archive. And at 2 p.m., posing as a quality assurance observer, his mere intimidating presence accidentally forces the Literary Arts Fund to give grant money to actual, genuinely talented artists. It is an absolute masterclass in using the system's own rules against itself.
Section 5. The Writers Awaken. Bypassing the channels.
Let's zoom in on the micro-level impact here, specifically focusing on a poet named Natasha Ivanovna Surakova. She was sitting in the third row during that wild theater performance. When she leaves, she magically finds her own unapproved pending manuscript, one she submitted to a state committee 2 agonizing years ago, tucked right inside her own coat pocket. Woland had personally returned it to her. This miraculous return completely shatters her conditioning. She realizes right then and there that she doesn't actually have to wait for official permission to exist. She goes straight home, stops writing carefully, and furiously writes her raw, unfiltered truth until 4 a.m.
But, writing truth in a society of lies requires a completely different kind of distribution. Enter Samizdat. To give some context here, Samizdat was a real underground distribution network that completely bypassed the state's infinite, suffocating review process. Authors would self-publish their work, secretly copying it out by hand or on a typewriter, and then passing it directly from reader to reader. It was literally the only way true literature could survive in the gaps of official control.
So, Natasha bravely takes her brand new work to the Arbat Street Network. This specific node is operated by a woman named Vera Alexandrovna. For 11 years, Vera has been evaluating, physically copying, and distributing unapproved manuscripts using false bottom bags and slipping them into coat pockets right under the noses of the secret police. Despite being actively followed by state surveillance, Natasha fully commits her work to Vera's network. And to complete the circuit, Azazello appears out of nowhere on the street and gives Natasha the name of a Western contact, ensuring her words will ultimately cross the border and outlive the regime entirely.
Section 6. Manuscripts do not burn. The residue of true art.
And now we arrive at the climax of The Explainer, Woland's late-night conversation with Ivan Bezdomny. Ivan is a former poet who slowly turned into a state-approved critic, and he is completely agitated by the theater performance. It hit him hard. He realizes he's spent the last 25 years writing safe, sterile prose instead of the bold poetry he was actually meant to write. So he visits the Devil's apartment at midnight, desperate for the truth about his old friend, a writer known as the Master, and a legendary manuscript from 1935 that was supposedly destroyed in a fire.
Woland looks at Ivan and delivers this absolute gut punch of an iconic line. The manuscript doesn't burn. Things that exist find their way.
So the crucial point is this. Woland is assuring Ivan, and by extension all of us, that genuine art outlasts any oppressive system. You can burn the physical paper, you can ban the author, but the truth within the work has a permanence that bureaucracy simply cannot touch.
To summarize this profound conclusion, Woland firmly believes the world has a natural bias toward the survival of genuine things. Suppressed truth always leaves a residue. He beautifully compares the current state of Moscow to almost frozen water. It's sitting there deciding whether to freeze over completely or whether something true will break through the surface. He challenges Ivan to start writing real words again, because putting genuine art out into the world permanently changes the probabilities of the future. It's a powerful call to action.
As we wrap up this explainer on The Devil's Second Visit, I want to turn the mirror back on us for a second. We might not be living in 1960s Moscow, but this evolution of control, it's pretty universal. So I leave you with this thought. What unnamed fears or invisible bureaucracies are dictating the shape of your actual life today? Are you living your official life or your actual life? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I highly encourage you to reflect on that question as you go about your day. Catch you next time.